Sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk. Something on your mind anytime. I'm here to listen, sister talk. When you need someone who understands, I know what you're missing, sister talk. No.
So here's my guest. She's been on the show before. Let's welcome, boys and girls, men and women, my sisters and brothers, TAMI TYREE. Hi, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, before we get into Frederick Douglass, the events that are coming up, I want you to talk about a little bit about yourself. Now, I do remember that you were here a couple of years, some years ago, and you did something of 12 Years a Slave.
Yes, I was singing in that film.
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're all about.
Well, I am really about bringing the culture of African Americans to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you would say I'm a cultural historian.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I began my program, which I call Echoes of Our Ancestors, in 2008.
Yes. 10 years. Congratulations.
I know.
Some people don't stick
by.
with their projects that long. That's great.
Yeah, well, you know, it wasn't something that I knew I would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a singer and a performer, but my priorities changed when I had my children. I was really concerned that my children were not going to learn African American history. And I started teaching them and telling them things. And then I realized that most parents don't have the time or the wherewithal to really ensure that. And the schools are not going to do it.
No.
They should,
They should.
but they're not going to. So we have to take it upon ourselves.
Okay. So you are, your expertise is in African music, correct?
African American music.
African American music. And they used your expertise in 12 Years of a Slave. Is that true? Or
Yes, I was recommended to do the singing. It was not, you didn't see my face. I was a person that was singing for the actors that were singing.
Oh, really? Wow.
Right, and I was recommended because I have a very large specialty in knowledge about the spirituals.
Okay.
Which at the time were called Negro spirituals, as you know.
Spirituals.
The slave song.
No. Remember to call in the show and ask questions, 212-757-1393. That's 212-757-1393. I know you all have lots of questions about these upcoming events featuring Frederick Douglass' story. So, why Frederick Douglass? What made you really get into that?
Oh my gosh. You know, it's so funny because I'm a program that I don't have to answer to a lot of people about what I want to do. So I really go on instinct, gut. I'll wake up with an idea. I'll flesh it out in my mind.
And you just
I just go for it.
Well, tell us about the events that are coming up, though.
Okay, so answering your first part of the question about how I got involved with Frederick Douglass will explain how I got to this point. So when Barack Obama was leaving office, I was actually grieving. I was like, oh, as so many of us. But you know, there's something that happens to me in the morning. I get all these really good thoughts in the morning. I woke up one morning and I said, well, you know, we had someone who came as close to being a president that he could be in his day and time, and that was Frederick Douglass. And I said that without really knowing a lot about him. He's like this mythical, you know, person that you see in statues and streets and schools and all these things. But I said that, and then I said, but how much do you really know about him? And so my goal was to kind of like, I call it melting the ice off of the icon. I wanted to find out about this person, this God, this kind of mythical, icon
So
person.
Frederick Douglass just came to mind when you when you thought he was as close to President.
Right. I
as
felt
Barack
that I felt we had a president unofficially, which I felt was him.
Why is that?
And when I did my research, I still believe that. Well, Frederick Douglass was the person who spoke up for and actually negotiated for us to become free. He was called upon by Abraham Lincoln. And he actually, just like you and I are talking, he met with Abraham Lincoln 3 times.
Oh, 3 times? Really?
And enlisted those who were enslaved to help fight the war, because unbeknownst to a lot of people, the Union Army was losing the Civil War. And Frederick Douglass said, well, let us fight for our own freedom. And so with the help of the African Americans enslaved, we were able to do that.
Why wouldn't they let the enslaved people fight in the Union Army? Do you know why they would not?
Well, I don't think it even crossed their mind to have slaves fighting, because they were slaves.
Well, and also they had guns. Do they have access to guns, right?
But, Frederick Douglass was a person who was very resourceful and was very, wanted to be able to control his own destiny, and felt that that African Americans and that the slaves, someone was already controlling our destiny, and here was a war that was ultimately about the slavery issue, and we wanted to be free, so let us fight for our freedom. That's how he felt.
Please call the show if you have any questions about the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. 212-757-1393. That's 212-757-1393. A lot of people don't realize that Frederick Douglass had a large hand in the freedom of enslaved people. They don't realize that his children, he enlisted all, 4 of his?
His 2 of his sons fought. They were of age to do so. The other son was too young to do so, but the 2 that were able, yes, and one almost died, and died a very serious, he came very close to death. So he almost lost his son to the war. And Frederick Douglass actually was given a job by Abraham Lincoln. The exact title of which I can't restate right now. But he was given a job where he would go into the trenches when the Union Army would take over an area and free those slaves and then turn them around and have them fight. Wow. So he literally was on the battleground walking through with this job.
And being that he was on the battleground, I understand that that there was a difference in the way they were treated.
That's another thing that fascinates me about Frederick Douglass. This is a person I feel had so much gall. So imagine this. Okay, so you go there and you create a job for yourself. So he basically created a job for the enslaved people, and they were going to get paid because, soldiers do get paid. And he went back to Abraham Lincoln when he discovered that the black soldiers were getting paid less than the white soldiers. So he went back and said, well, we quit. We're not going to fight anymore. And of course, Abraham Lincoln said, well, why not? You're paying the white soldiers X amount and you're paying us less. So we want to get equal pay. So he's also a union laborer. I mean, there's so many things that this person turned out to be. And that to me is just, I was laughing about it. I was like, okay, I'm a slave, somebody's paying me. Most people would say, well, okay, I'm glad I'm getting something. No, it still wasn't enough. That takes gall. This is the kind of person that we were dealing with. And so Abraham Lincoln had to, he had to respect that. There's another, since we're talking about the Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass relationship, there's another interesting thing that happened. When Abraham Lincoln was reelected to his 2nd term, the inaugural ball, Frederick Douglass was not invited because he's black, right? So Frederick Douglass went up to the White House, to the front door, and they wouldn't let him in. So a little scuffle kind of, and he said, well, go find Abraham Lincoln because he'll let me in because I helped him so much. And so finally, somebody went and got Abraham Lincoln, and he said, yes, let him in, he's my friend. And that's how he went in. So he even crashed the inaugural ball. Because he was about, I'm entitled. He was about entitlement, equality, and he was not, he was a person who, yes, he was born of a African mother and his white master, okay? And he was not a person who really, from having done about 3 years of research now, because I've really been doing a Frederick Douglass Festival for about 3 years. This is the 3rd season.
Well, wow, that's great. Before we get into that festival, I want to talk about what I like myself and other people like about Frederick Douglass is that he was self-taught, taught himself how to read and write, became this great orator. And people would come from everywhere just to hear him speak. And he traveled speaking against, slavery and all that. But the scuffle, when you mentioned scuffle, it brought me back when he fought one of his, his owner, one of the owners?
Oh, yes, yes.
Or somebody he was lended out to, I forgot. Yes. He fought this guy.
Yes,
and that guy never bore him again.
Plantation. So this is a journal. It's not a book because I'm a public historian and I talk to the general public. So I'm very realistic about how much the general public wants to know and how much time they're going to dedicate. So what I do is do a lot of research and then I boil it down for the general public. So this is something that I created, it has a copyright of 2017, where it talks about all these places that you can go in Maryland and Baltimore and Washington, D.C., which was his hub. That's where he was born, in that area. I wanted to know where I could go to witness things that were really in his life. And a lot of those plantations and things are still around, amazingly so. So the one where you're talking about where Covey, he and Covey had that fight that lasted a half an hour.
Right.
Or at least he wrote about it.
Yes.
And he said he had to, state his manhood and rebel.
Right.
And the reason why that happened was because he was so rebellious that his masters, they had people that were known as slave breakers.
Right.
And so if you had a slave that was so unruly, there were certain slaves that, this is Covey. This is the plantation.
Oh, really? That's what that, okay.
Okay, so that's the plantation where he was. And it's in St. Michael's, Maryland. So
when they had the slave breakers, they broke you. They did anything they could to break you,
they were
right?
so difficult. Yeah, they would bring you there. And Frederick Douglass also writes that Covey was so bad, he asked his master to would he take and bring him back, and he said, no, you stay. you stay there. You stay there. But they had a push-pull, relationship.
But Covey never bothered him
No,
again.
he never bothered him again after that.
The big slave breaker.
Exactly. He had to break the slave breaker.
You know what was so much interesting about Frederick Douglass? And mind you saying that, I'm going to not digress, but say something about the schools are not teaching us, maybe not the parents either. But I remember going to bed as a child. My mother would say nursery rhymes. And after the Red Riding Hood and everything, she would talk about slavery. And she would talk about how the man would come and break you up. You wouldn't see John anymore. You wouldn't see Christina anymore. You wouldn't see Octavia anymore. So that affected me a lot. That's what happened to Frederick Douglass. He was sold from his mom, correct? And I remember reading that his mom would have to walk a mile before they miss her, so for work, to just hold him to sleep and walk back. But she eventually died. And she was, I'm not sure, African?
Yeah, she was African, yes.
Yeah, she was African. So, if you can really think about that, the destruction, the emotional turmoil that's still probably in our DNA. You know, they say that geniuses are in our DNA. Well, think about the hurt. Think about all of that that we as a people went through as slavery, being whipped, raped in front of your families, being separated and all that. That is still a part of us. So it's a lot of work.
Not having a family or a mother or a father or, you know, and then being left to like his cousins and his aunt. Yeah. You know, who used to starve him to death.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, really? Wow.
His aunt, one of his aunts, you know, that was a cook, because she had her kids, and he was light complexioned.
Right. Okay.
Not his mother was not, but he was light complexioned, and this aunt that was the cook, and had her own children. She didn't like him. That was one of the reasons, knowing where he came from and who fathered him and stuff like that. And she wouldn't feed him. He would, and so he was. He was like.
I do want to say one thing I do remember. His grandmother took him to another plantation, and I think he was about 5 years old, maybe older. I don't know, and told him to go play with the kids, and she left. And he looked around. He realized his grandmother was gone. But what would happen was he was sold to another plantation. So he said he sat there and he cried and he cried. And I'm about to cry, but I'm gonna hang in there. You know? He cried. You're talking about child trauma.
Exactly.
Child trauma. Yeah, Frederick Douglass was a remarkable man. He was an angel, I should say, that was one of the chosen. You know?
Well, I think he chose himself.
Okay.
I don't think he was per se a chosen. He was a very, they talked to some people that were in their 90s and whatever, that was still alive and knew him as a child after he had become who he was, you know, that we knew him to be. And they said even as a kid, he was always talking about getting out, leaving.
Oh, really? Wow.
Escaping. And when he did finally escape, that wasn't his first attempt. You know, there are people who have a trajectory that they know about early on in their life. And in spite of everything that happened with him, he always knew he was going to get out. You know, he lived and breathed, not because somebody was going to be nice and put him out, but he used to pay off those little white boys to help him read.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
He was actually taught by his initial reading lessons was one of the slave master's wives.
Yeah.
And when her husband literally caught them practicing reading, in front of Frederick Douglass, he said, don't teach him how to read. Once you teach a slave how to read, he can never be a slave. And he became more determined
to do
so
that.
This was something that that came in him very early.
Let's take this phone call. Caller, you watch a Sister Talk TV show. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Frida. I'm calling from Harlem.
Hi, Frida. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad I caught this show.
Thank you.
And my question is, right now there's a huge momentum for African descendants of slavery to get reparations. Every Democratic presidential candidate is being asked, how do you feel about reparations? I'd like to ask your guest, what is their feeling or their sense where Frederick Douglass, where our ancestors who pushed us through enslavement, got us on the other side of enslavement, where we had nothing and left with nothing, how would he feel about our demand for reparations in 2019?
Caller, can I ask you a question? How do you feel about it before we answer that? Or Tammy?
I hope it's evident, but yes, I definitely feel we are overdue and there should be interest on it.
Oh, I hear you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I definitely feel that we should have gotten and we should get reparations. I mean, other cultures got reparations, And there was actually a form of reparation that was put in place right after slavery. Reconstruction was a legal system to immerse the once enslaved Africans into society. Colleges were set up. There was the Freedmen's Bank. There were some problems with it. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of things that were put in place, and Reconstruction was a legal thing, and it was to end in 1877. But if you remember, there were African Americans holding office. There were senators and other civil leaders that were able to run. We were given full citizenship. So there was a form of, it wasn't a dollar and cents kind of thing. We know that the 40 acres and a mule thing didn't really pan out, but that was the form of
reparations.
The reparations, so to speak.
And they flipped it. The Democrats flipped it, and they got kicked out of Congress and Senate, and here we are today.
Well,
we have to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, what actually happened with Reconstruction is that it was a legal mandate, and it ended officially in 1877.
Okay. My bad. Okay,
Right.
Let's take this phone call. Caller, you watch the Sister Talk TV show. What's your name and where you calling from?
Oh, Carol calling from Harlem.
Say hello to Tammy. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to say that if you ever do come back, could you please speak about the very first Black president that we actually had?
Oh, yeah, I forgot his name, Tammy. Carol, what's his name? I know you're talking about you know.
I can't remember either.
Because he passed big time, right?
Well, he didn't. Yeah, I forget his name, and he didn't identify himself as Black, but in his lineage, and I can't even remember his name. It was not one of the most well-known or earth-shaking presidents, but in his lineage, and I can't remember which one it is because I don't want to throw out the name.
Okay.
But there was someone who had in his lineage. Okay.
Are you still there?
Yes, go ahead.
He came right after George Washington.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll talk about. That's a good topic. That's a good show to have. Passing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Before we get into, we only have a couple of more minutes before we go to the video, but I want to talk about his obituary.
Oh, yes.
New York Times wrote an obituary. Please elaborate.
Okay, so there's two events happening in Harlem regarding Frederick Douglass. And the first one, April 18th, myself and Dr. William Sorrell of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, better known as ASALH, we are going to be going over this obituary. Now, the reason why the obituary came into the story was that Frederick Douglass chose Valentine's Day as his birthday. He knew he was born in February. His mother used to call him her little Valentine, so he just chose that day. So this year on Valentine's Day, the New York Times reprinted his obituary of 1895.
Oh, wow.
So when I printed it out, it's about 15 pages, and I was reading it, and I went, there were some things. And other historians did the same. We read it, and we kind of had some issues.
So what was the biggest thing that was missing for us?
There's a few things.
But what the one that we were talking about? I want to mention that. We have to say that.
Okay. So this obituary is quite sprawling since he had quite a long life. But I was incensed enough to say that I was going to have a panel discussion and put together an event, which was not on my radar. I was incensed by the fact that they never mentioned his wife, the mother of his 5, one child died, 4 children, never mentioned her by name or anything. And
Say my name. Say my name.
Thought that was terrible.
Yes. She's the one who, what was her name?
Anna Murray Douglas.
She was the one who helped him escape. Bore his 5 children. Entrepreneur. She wasn't just sitting at home. She was making money, providing, while he was touring all over the country and over the world, Europe, and all that. And didn't mention his name, but he did mention the last wife, the second wife.
Yes, but there was, because that's who he was with when he died, and everything was about her.
And you know, I'm not to overshadow his accomplishments, but I have to say this though, is, you know, because she was white, I believe they mentioned her and wanted to put Miss Anna in the back. Tell us about the convention.
So, there will be a discussion, first of all, about that obituary, a panel discussion where we will go through the obituary, because the other historian that's on the panel with me has some other things, some issues that he wants to discuss. And I mentioned, as you say, one thing that I want to. So we will be clarifying, elongating, eliminating, just rewriting this whole thing. Because, you know, right now, history is in the hands of the people. And we are no longer accepting statues of people, of Confederate losers, okay? You know, we are not accepting these things anymore. We're not going to accept all this wrong information or misinformation that is out there about our people. Right. We need to be in control and tell our own stories.
Okay, so you have the events May 4th.
May 4th is a gala that's a fun thing.
Okay.
May 4th is the community is going to come together.
It's a gala.
So let me finish telling you about May 4th, because May 4th is something that everybody, you can't miss it. It's going to be so fantastic.
Okay.
So what it is, I went to Mother A.M.E. Zion Church, which is on 137th between Lenox Avenue.
Mother Zion.
Yes. Mother A.M.E. Zion Church is the oldest black church in Manhattan.
Wow. Yes.
1795. It started down in Lower Manhattan, and you know, it is now permanently in this location. And it has been landmarked. It is the headquarter church for the A.M.E. Zion denomination, which is a break off of the Methodist Church that the slaves and the enslaved, they were going to John Methodist Church downtown, and down by Wall Street, but they had to sit up in the balcony and they couldn't be served communion until everybody else and all these different things. So they broke off and started their own church. Okay, so that's what the A.M.E. Zion, African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church.
Okay.
And Frederick Douglass was a member of that church. He also was ordained a minister, but he didn't continue his career as a minister because he got involved with the abolitionist movement.
Freedom fighters, I call them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that church is called the Freedom Church. And actually, that's the church I was born into. That's my denomination. You know, I'm from Long Island. I went to a small A.M.E. Zion church, but that's the headquarter church for the denomination.
Okay.
So when I moved into Manhattan, you know, I have an association with that church. So I wanted to do a Frederick Douglass program, so I went to them. It made sense to see if they were interested in hosting the event. And so they are opening up their doors for the event. But it is not a religious event. It is a community event. And we're going to have speakers, performers, great oratory. We have, the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass's famous 4th of July speech will be performed by Jonathan Dewberry.
Wow.
I'm sure that a lot of people know that name because last summer he was in a play and he was playing James Baldwin. He's a very fine actor, and he's going to be doing that speech. I'll be singing. There's some great singers. We have African dance, we have drumming.
So it's going to be, I'll be there.
It's going to be a fantastic event.
So, go ahead.
It is in collaboration with the Office of the Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer.
Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I can't wait to be there. Can't wait to see it. Come check it out. Again, what's the dates again?
May 4th, 2 o'clock, Mother A.M.E. Zion. Free,
And-
just come on in.
Sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk, sister, 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 sister talk. Something on your mind anytime. I'm here to listen. Sister talk. When you need someone who understands, I know what you're missing. Sister talk. No matter what you're going through, don't worry, I ain't going nowhere. Sister talk. If you ever feel alone, say the word, I'll be right there. Sister talk. Sister, 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 sister talk. Sister, sister, sister.